also fixing what's called, and this has been the bane of driving me crazy when I was out of office, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Now, this program forgives student loans to encourage those students who have those loans if they go and do public service. Think of the millions who are public school teachers, local police officers, workers at local charities, members of the military and the National Guard, and so many more. Think of the folks who work for federal, state, local, tribal governments, keeping essential services going, responding to natural disaster, all those firefighters and cops. The program is designed so that if you serve in one of these jobs, and we'll be able to list those and you'll be able to accurately assess whether you do, and make your loan payments for 10 years, even if it's not consecutive years, your remaining balance will be completely forgiven. It's a great idea, but the program's a mess. It's so inefficient and complicated, too many people just give up.
That is the President of the United States. It is Thursday, August 25th, 2022, and the President on Wednesday announced a plan to cancel debt for a subset of Americans and continue to a pandemic-era pause on repayments, a sweeping move he has openly weighed in some form or another since his time as a candidate. President Biden apparently recognizing again his campaign pledge and how African Americans were chiefly responsible for his campaign win, spelled out that his actions yesterday helped to advance racial equity. One reason it does, he said, is that Black students are more likely to have to borrow more money and take out larger loans than others. Also, Black borrowers are twice as likely to have received Pell Grants compared to their white peers. Other borrowers of color are also more likely than their peers to receive Pell Grants. This is why an Urban Institute study found that debt forgiveness programs targeting those who receive Pell Grants while in college will advance racial equity. We'll discuss that this morning and dissect it as we hear from Dr. Tony Allen, the chair of the President's Board of Advisors on HBCUs. Dr. Allen, of course, is also the president of Delaware State University. We also have with us Dr. Tisa Silver Canady, who authored the book, Borrowing While Black, and she's personally advised students and families on the repayment of more than $50 million in student loan debt. Good morning, Dr. Canady. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. It's great to have you. And before you and I get started, we're going to check out the conversation we had with Dr. Allen right now.
Great.
Okay. This is, in no uncertain terms, the most comprehensive, transformative initiative on student debt relief in American history, full stop. So when you think about the lives that it touches, which is upwards of 43 million Americans, around an issue that a lot of folks have talked about, but very little action has been done for. The significance of this will generate for many, many years to come. In the HBCU community in particular, we have already done some back of the envelope analysis. And if you just take the last 10 years, 1.1 million HBCU alum will benefit for this program. And upwards of about $15 billion of debt relief forgiveness will be afforded that 1.1 million. So I can't tell you how drastic of an opportunity and a moment it is for our HBCU community and for the larger American citizenry.
And Dr. Allen, you know, you kind of was the precursor in some ways to this. A year ago, your school forgave a large amount of student debt. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, something in the neighborhood of $750,000 was one report, but I never got the exact figure. But I know that you did something really big at your school at Delaware State last year. Tell me about that, and how does this all fit in with what the president is doing today?
Well, thank you for saying that. In fact, we've done a couple of tranches since COVID. So in total, we've forgiven about $8.3 million in debt relief since COVID. And we've been proud to do that. A lot of that has been aided directly by the COVID relief packages. And certainly the president's relief package in that regard has been instructive and helpful for us. So it's a significant accelerator in that regard. I should say that as the HBCU community, Delaware State was not alone in forgiving debt. And I'd argue that the HBCU community took the lead on forgiving debt in the middle of the greatest global pandemic the world has ever seen. So we're actually very proud of that. We do see this as at least a small step toward what we are seeing today. But we did it for good reasons. I don't have to tell you. We're only 3% of all college and universities in the country, only 3%. We're still graduating nearly 20% of all Black students in the country. And you know what our alumni are doing. So our ability to punch above our weight, provide real opportunities. One study says that still today, the number one driver for a low resource African-American woman or man to enter the Black middle class is their attendance at an HBCU. So it behooves us to take a real opportunity to not only get our kids in college, but make sure that they walk across that stage and find themselves pursuing their dreams the way that they want to.
So the Pell Grants, this is important. When I went to school years ago, I had a Pell Grant. The Pell Grant is so important. So $20,000 is the number there. We keep hearing the 10,000 number, but those who have Pell Grants, it's up to $20,000 in forgiveness. As from a HBCU perspective, again, from a Black student perspective, in addition to HBCUs, talk about the significance of that, because there's a method, and I listened to the president today, and it seems to be a method behind why he chose that.
Yes, I think that's a great question. Think about it this way. And again, we are proxy Delaware State for a lot of HBCUs across the country. But at Delaware State, 67% of our students are Pell eligible. 67%. That's not inconsistent with any HBCU you'll find across this country. Even more important, 90% of our students receive some form of federal aid. So when you put all of that in context, like to your point, if you are Pell eligible, you can receive up to $20,000 in debt relief. And if you're not, it's $10,000. The one factoid that I've been talking about all day is 90% of all the federal aid and student debt relief that we will see as a result of this initiative will go to folks making $75,000 or less. If you just extrapolate that a little bit about who those folks are, that's recent alum who are just starting their career or thinking about what's next for them and are looking some student debt obligation in the face. And the president and his team have literally just made the impossible possible for millions of Americans as a result. So I think he has really structured this in a way that's economically judicious, actually is an investment that will pay back big dividends in the American economy. And to his point, is creating an opportunity that is grounded from the bottom up and the middle out, which is exactly where we want to be as a nation.
Yeah, I read a report too that sort of estimated on average the average student debt is $25,000. Is that accurate? And if that's accurate, then we're talking about the potential of eliminating, because also the White House mentioned that 1 in 4 will have total debt forgiveness. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think it's important, because it's still criticism. Why didn't he cancel all the debt? Or the other side, he shouldn't cancel any debt. I had to pay for it. You should pay for it.
Yeah, well, again, I think you'll have some affinity to this notion. You all know that equal is not equitable. So this notion of equity, I think, has been a linchpin of the Biden administration. The fact that this helps those folks who have the greatest need over the longest time horizon with what we think is the highest award that is reasonable is significant. And to your point about the factoid, 1 in 4 African Americans in this program, right, will literally have all of their debt obligation eliminated. 1 in 4. For the Hispanic brothers and sisters, it's 1 in 3. And that's just a portion of this effort. The other thing that's happened is we have been able to uplift the public service debt forgiveness program, which is a little known program that is getting a lot of light today as a result of this announcement. It effectively says if you have worked in the federal government, state government, local government, or the millions of nonprofits across this country for 10 years or more, you are likely eligible for complete debt forgiveness as well. There's an application process to it. So it's the application is due on October 31st. But again, our ability to make sure that our brothers and sisters know that this opportunity exists and are taking advantage of it in kind is really why this initiative has been proposed and why I'm out here beating the drum across the space today.
Well, and beating the drum across the space also means educating folks on how to take advantage of this. This will provide relief of up to, from what the White House says, 43 million borrowers. But isn't that something that the borrower has to do at this point? It's just not going to happen organically, right?
Go to studentaid.gov/debt relief, and it will tell all the borrowers everything they need to do and all the communications they will need to follow to make sure they're taking advantage of the opportunity.
And before we let you go, Dr. Allen, speak to your students at Delaware State, if you will, and about how proud you are of this moment, because again, you and other HBCUs last year and even prior to that, you guys have, and you stated it already, you really have been attacking this even at the HBCU level, and now you have a role with the White House, a really important role for HBCUs there at the White House, and of course, you are the president of Delaware State. Talk to your students for just for one moment. Tell them how proud you are of this moment and how proud they should be.
Well, let me just start this way. I'm extraordinarily proud of them. Many of our students come to this university and other HBCUs like it to change their life trajectory for themselves, their families, and their communities. And many of them do it against enormous odds. It is our responsibility to make sure that they not only come to this university, but they matriculate, find the support that they were looking for, graduate in short order, and then can pursue their dreams without equivocation. We do a lot of that here at Delaware State University. As it relates to the scholarships we offer, you can actually have, for a Delaware graduating high school senior, if you have a 2.75, you could come to Delaware State tuition free. For every incoming freshman, we give an iPad or a MacBook Pro. That's around digital equity and reducing the cost of textbooks. And we are raising millions of dollars in scholarships. And I can tell you, I don't have to tell you this, but I should tell you that HBCUs do more with less. Less is no longer acceptable. And the Biden administration has heard us in word and deed. So what I would tell my students is continue to make us proud and don't leave a dime on the table. Remember that the borrowers eligible for this are anybody that had their loan originated on July 1st, 2022 or before. That means that incoming freshmen are eligible, current existing students are eligible, and certainly alumni from as far back as their debt obligation goes are eligible too. So it is a notable moment in American history for this to be happening, and particularly for our grand legacy in historically Black colleges and universities.
I'm so sorry. That was awesome. So Dr. Canady, HBCUs, let's talk about that first. I saw some other questions, but I see they were pretty much answered. Danielle Pierre had asked about the Pell Grants, and your friend and mine, my sister, Dr. Nicole, answered that question brilliantly, I see. But but could you just go on a little bit more and really talk about how important this is for all, because there's what the numbers show, 43 million students will have some debt relief here.
Yes, so I think it's really important for people to look at all of the features of this plan. I want to start out by going back to the Pell Grant that you mentioned. The Pell Grant is a free source of federal financial aid, but the purchasing power of the Pell Grant has declined significantly over the years. During his remarks yesterday, President Biden mentioned, I believe, that maybe the Pell Grant covers about 32% of a student's college cost for a year, and that means that that remaining amount has to come from somewhere. It would have to come from the student's cash or savings or from student loans. And for Black students in particular, we tend to borrow more often and in larger amounts because we're more likely to come from lower income households. The flip side of that, coming from a lower income household, is increased eligibility for Pell Grants. So the decision to include this higher amount of relief specifically for Pell Grant recipients is one that is directly going to impact Black students.
Yeah, and that was part of the point that the administration on a call yesterday morning with members of the media, they were really stressing that point and the significance too, because of this 100, those who make less than $125,000 a year. When you hear that figure, you say, okay, but how big is that as well, Dr. Kennedy?
Well, I think you have to look at who is expected to benefit from this program. And as Dr. Allen mentioned, this is going to people, for the most part, I believe around 90% who earn less than $75,000 per year. That's something else that will help the Black community directly as well, because another thing that tends to happen to Black graduates is earning less upon graduation. So in combination with targeting people who are Pell Grant recipients and also looking at annual income, this just shows me that there was deliberate thought paid to addressing student loan debt for Black borrowers.
Yeah, and it did certainly seem like it was, it was deliberate thought. One of the things that during the campaign, the Biden-Harris team continued to talk about targeting specific students, but also when you think about what happened yesterday, and then you hear that there is still a lot of criticism. Some say, why not just forgive all? Can you talk about that aspect of it?
Sure. So I have been very actively involved in engaging with people about the movement to cancel student debt. I think that people who are asking for all have valid reasons, because aside from just the financial side that individuals are dealing with, especially Black borrowers, from borrowing more often, there's a side where you have to really apply some scrutiny to the lenders and the servicers. And there have been so many documented cases of mismanagement of federal student loan servicing, of practices like steering borrowers into forbearances, which for a borrower might provide relief in that it's a temporary pause in payments, but it's a pause during which interest accrues. So one of those cases of mismanagement was that servicers were found to have allowed people to have their loans in a forbearance state for longer than was permitted by the federal government. And that means that those balances were growing over time. So I think that it's really it's a multi-layered issue. So canceling it all would take into account the high borrowing amounts, the cases of mismanagement, but it also gets around means testing, because many people are concerned that once you apply some type of income cap or means test, you're going to make it difficult for the borrowers who need it most to access those benefits. So I can understand people who say, you know what, we need a clean slate, get rid of it all, let's start fresh. However, I think we have to be realistic about what would be accepted, especially in this political climate. And while I do understand their argument, I have to say that I'm optimistic about this particular plan that the Biden administration has unveiled as a start to additional forms of relief. But just take some time to celebrate this win and what it will do before you think so much about what is not included in this particular plan.
Yeah, the amount of student loan debt that the administration has canceled so far, I think is overlooked. It's several $billions so far since they've taken office. That's a fact. So we have to, and I love the way Dr. Allen was putting a factoid, but also he said something very important, I thought, for incoming freshmen. This applies to them as well. Can you talk about that, because I know there's a lot of anxiety when you're starting college for the first time, and you're starting with most of us, we start with debt, right? But this applies to those who are just starting as well, incoming freshmen.
So I want to go back to the plan and mention another thing, which is the pause in repayment. I can't tell you how many text messages I got yesterday, people asking me, when are these payments going to start? Are they going to start next week? And I said, just hold on, let's wait. And we found out that that extension has moved to December 31st. And that's something that can also benefit incoming students, because it's not just a pause in payments, but it's a pause on interest accrual. So that means that there's more time for people who are in school now to experience the benefit of having interest not accrue on the unsubsidized portion of their debt. So I encourage people, as Dr. Allen said, to visit studentaid.gov/debt relief to take a look at the various measures that this plan includes. And then as more details come out in the coming months, they'll be able to figure out exactly which provisions apply to them.
Yeah, and so the Department of Education estimates that among borrowers who are eligible for relief, and I thought this breakdown too was significant. 21% are 25 years old and under, and 44% are ages 26 to 39, and more than a third are borrowers age 40 and up, including 5% of borrowers who are senior citizens. So when you break down the age category and you think about the amount of debt accrued, this is significant too, because you're leaving, you're in, some argued, and I heard this argument by, I believe it was Republican Tim Scott, who says, okay, so people making all this money, you're going to, you're going to give this break to as well, but you're saying that they should pay more in taxes. But the point I think Tim Scott was trying to make was that, so you're just randomly giving folks, but it's not random, is it?
No, I don't see anything random about this. It might not be everything that everyone wanted this to be. As for the Republican side, I don't believe they wanted this at all, from what I've heard. But it's, you really have to look at what this entails, and it's very detailed. It implies deliberate thought, and it will have benefits for a large group of Americans. And as you mentioned, this is not just a young folks problem. And I think that one issue around student loans is that people have fed into this notion that this is just about individual borrowers living it up while they're in college, having too many lattes, avocado toast party, whatever it is. It's been branded as this issue that only applies to privileged young people.
Yeah.
That's not the case. This is something that affects people from their teens all the way up to their 90s. And in fact, most of the people that I deal with and helping them navigate this student loan repayment landscape are 45 years and older. And the amount of debt that they have is staggering. Sometimes it's for themselves. Sometimes it's in combination with loans that they've taken out to provide education for their children. So I think I veered off a little bit, but I think we do need to get to the branding issue of this and making sure that people know that this is not just, it's not helping wealthy people. I don't know any wealthy people that actually have student loan debt remaining, and income and wealth do not mean the same thing. This is a deliberate plan that has multiple layers that will affect millions of people, with deliberate attention paid to the experience of Black borrowers as well.
Yeah, I want to lift up what Tracy Woods wrote. He says, kudos to Robert Smith. I believe he got many of us focused on the impact of student loans on Black students. And Dr. Canady, you authored the book, Borrowing While Black. This has been such an issue. And Daniela Pierre, who I think is looking in my notes, because I was going to ask about this too. I was going to mention this, that she writes that student loan debt impacts many borrowers when attempting to seek a mortgage loan approval. This also is important because we're talking about generational wealth. And one major way that when we speak of generational wealth, we talk about home ownership. Can you, again, expand on how important that aspect is of it, and really speak to what Daniela Pierre writes about those impacted, with mortgage approvals?
Yes. Home ownership has long been a way to increase our wealth and build that equity so that we can have something left over to pass on to our children. And in many cases, people with higher student loan burdens have been left out of that because their debt to income ratio is too high. So, one thing in this plan includes the creation of a new income driven repayment plan, which will reduce the amount of money that borrowers are expected to pay for their monthly student loan payments. And by having that lower debt obligation each month, that frees up income that could be used to invest in something like owning a home, which can increase in value in the future. So I'm so glad that she brought that up, because another problem that I see is people thinking about student loans in isolation. People think, oh, well, that's just for college people. They'll pay off the debt, they'll be fine. But having large amounts of debt, whether it's student loan debt or any other type of debt, it can shut you out of opportunities to invest in assets that will increase in value over time, or at least have the possibility of increasing. So this is not just about freeing up student loan debt. This is about opening up opportunities for people to participate in parts of the economy that were not open to them prior to announcements like this, or prior to the improvements that were made to the public service loan forgiveness program. So again, I just encourage people to think about this, not in isolation, but think about this holistically, and the doors that will open up for people, because relief like this has been provided with multiple layers, including that payment pause, the creation of a new repayment plan, as well as that direct relief up to $20,000 for Pell eligible borrowers.
Wow, Dr. Tisa Silver Canady. You again, we mentioned you authored the book Borrowing While Black, but you're working on another book. Can you just give us? You and I talked about this before we went live. Just a little sneak preview of what you're working on now that hopefully we'll see in the very near future.
Yes, so I'm working on a follow-up to Borrowing While Black. It's called Black Women Beyond the Bachelor's. It's been my lived experience, and one that I've heard about from many Black women, is that we are pursuing higher education at increasingly higher rates. But unfortunately, we're borrowing more money to obtain that education, and we're not experiencing that high return on our investment. And much of that is due to student loan debt, as well as lower earnings in the workplace. So I'm working on this book because I want to highlight this problem and spotlight Black women for their excellence, as well as for the struggles, and equip us all to achieve a higher ROI on that higher education experience. I've been working on the manuscript for a while, as I shared with you before the show, and I just felt like something was missing. But this experience in the recent year, with all of these changes in the student loan landscape, has led me to interact with so many people, primarily Black women, and I'm using their experiences to finish this book and make it so much more meaningful and personal. So I'm looking forward to finishing it, putting it out in early 2023, and again, just bringing light to this issue and helping Black women achieve a high ROI on their higher education experience.
Well, and it's really an issue that's near and dear to you. Obviously, you've written about it, but you also share it with what got you into this field in the first place. If you don't mind sharing that right quick, that would be great.
Sure. So I have to acknowledge my mother, who is an accountant and had me always focused on receipts in my early years. But I had an experience where I did what society said was the right thing to do. I bought a home. I maximized benefits that were available from my employer, down payment assistance, all of that. I did what was right, but the timing was off. I bought my house right before the market crashed as a result of the subprime mortgage crisis. So I found myself maybe a year and a half, 2 years later, sitting in a home that had lost about 40% of its value. I also found myself unexpectedly unemployed. And I thought, it doesn't seem right. You've done what society says is beneficial for you as an individual, as well as better for society in general. And here you are, stuck, unemployed, and wondering, how am I going to cover this mortgage? So I started to get into freelance writing, and I focused on how can I help people avoid being in the same situation that I found myself in. I found one job that was available, and that was at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, that addressed financial education and wellness on a college campus. And so I went in that direction. And over time, the experiences that I had advising students and families one-on-one about student loan repayment made me see some differences between the Black borrowing experience and the experiences of other students. It's not to say that students of all races or ethnicities don't face struggles. It's just that the Black borrowing experience is different. And as long as the numbers tell me it's different, I'm going to talk about it and hopefully provide people with solutions to achieve better outcomes.
Wow, what a story! I mean, after this book, you're gonna have to write your own story, your autobiography. That's
One day.
Yeah, we'll keep pushing you. Let's do it. But we thank Dr. Tisa Silver Canady, the author of the book Borrowing While Black, and you just heard what she's working on, and hopefully we'll see that early next year, as she said. And of course, Dr. Tony Allen. He is the president of Delaware State University. He heads the White House's initiative on HBCUs. And Dr. Allen, I got a family member going to Delaware State, so y'all keep up the good work. and we thank you guys for joining Let It Be Known. More on this student loan forgiveness situation. There's still a lot of controversy, but a lot of joy as well. So as it unfolds, we will continue to bring it to you right here on Let It Be Known. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.